All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on episode 172 of Blowback, Exposing Imperial Decline. I am one of your co-hosts, Billy Bob, and I am with my other co-host, Ian Cummer, who is streaming live from his dacha in Crimea. Did I pronounce dacha correctly? Dacha?
Yeah, it's from the word to give because Russia it goes back to the Russian Empire actually. But yeah, so it's very common in Russia for people to have vacation homes. We have our vacation home in this warm, sunny place in Crimea.
Yeah, so you're escaping what is beginning to be a very cold Moscow winter in the tropical climate of Crimea. Our special guest today is Dust James, and he is busy driving his truck through the roads of North Carolina, and so we really appreciate him joining us. And there's the big event that we are here to discuss. I referenced it in our title, and it's called. I entitled today's episode "The Ninnies Strike Back." And of course, that is a reference to the passing of our legendary co-host, Carlo Parcelli. So, yeah, we wanted to talk about Carlo a little bit, reminisce, and kind of have a celebration. Really, we don't want to be have a downer discussion, but a celebration of who Carlo was and what he meant to us, really. And the Ninnies Strike Back is a bit of a. I'm trying to bring some levity there. Ninnies is what Carlo referred to. Humans in the West, especially the United States, who just didn't have their head in the game. They just did not know what was going on, and they were manipulated into having advocacy that was just, face palming. It's like, oh my God. So, and it's really our struggle. It's the struggle of, people who are interested in progress, finding out how we can change things for the better, and yet we're up against this consciousness, the ninnies who are not on board and trying to derail any kind of progress. So having said that, I would also as we have our discussions, and maybe I'll start a little bit, but if anybody has any interest in jumping on the stream and joining us to say something about Carlo or about anything really, I'm going to go ahead and put the studio link in the comments section, which will make it easier for people. You can just click on that link, and then you should be able to join it. And if you don't want to, of course, like we're cool. Just if nobody joins us, that is cool as well. But if anybody would like to jump in, you're more than welcome to. So I know for myself, it was like 4 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, 3 to 4 years ago. And I was really kind of getting sick of just being on Facebook and texting with people. And I was really interested in jumping to a platform where, it has more fulfillment, more meaning, of, kind of, sharing what I think, is going on, what I think needs to happen. And so I was really having this conscious effort that I wanted to do something more than just Facebook discussions. And lo and behold, Carlo Parcelli was doing this program called Foreign Policy Review. And we were friends on Facebook, and he invited me on as his guest. And of course, it was very terrifying to jump the platform and to begin being live on camera and trying to talk. And it's a skill you learn and develop, but it was it was a good experience. And after joining Carlo as a guest, I think every week following, I kind of became a co-host. I was on every week, and then became a co-host, and then we had other co-hosts join us. And then eventually we wanted to do something more than just once a week. And that program was limited to just a half hour or an hour, just an hour. And so that's how we came up with Blowback and Imperial Decline. So what else to say? So a little bit about Carlo. So what is a title? He had this prestigious poet. He was the poet emeritus. Shoot, and I put that title on my on the picture of this video on YouTube, and so but I'm drawing a blank as to what his title was as a poet. But compared to the rest of us co-hosts, he was far more well-read with philosophy. He had obviously lived a lot longer, and he was just coming from a place that brought so much to the program. And so suffice it to suffice it to say, this program is not going to be the same without him, and he is already dearly missed, because like right now I'm running out of things to say, and I just want to throw it to Carlo and say, hey, say something great. Wow, we have 40 viewers. What a time to run out of things to say with 40 viewers. I never see 40 viewers. Okay, so
Carlo,
guys, can you help me out? Because I'm just I'm rambling a little bit.
I can share my version of the story. I came on after Billy Bob, kind of the same way. We met on Facebook, and this was in 2022. I was not in Russia at the point, and I had been in Russia. Then I came back to the USA, and then the Desmo and the sanctions all started, and that's when I ran into Billy Bob, and he invited me on the show, and that's where I met Carlo and Ben from Hungary, our other co-host who hasn't been on for a while, and that's where I met everybody. And I eventually became a co-host myself, and that's where we had very for me, Carlo always brought very colorful spirits to the show because one, he was our eldest member, so he could bring up things that the rest of us were not even around for, or didn't remember, or maybe wasn't even because a lot of things happen and just aren't in textbooks. If you weren't there for it, you wouldn't even know they happened. It's just unfortunately, the harsh reality of things. If a tree falls in the forest and no one hears it, did it really happen? So Carlo would be like, "Well, this thing happened in the 1970s and the 1980s." Reagan, that he had a lot to say about Reagan, which I guess shouldn't be surprising. And yeah, he brought a lot of even when we disagreed. Yeah, of course, believe it or not, the co-hosts on the show don't always agree. I know it's amazing to some people, but it was very, very, very colorful and passionate. And we do have our guest Dust. If he's not loading a truck right now, he might want to say something about Carlo also.
Yes. Thank you so much for asking me to come on. It really is a major loss. With brother Carlo, the show ain't going to be the same. I think I've known Billy Bob on Facebook for years, probably, right? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I was trained as a anti-revisionist Marxist-Leninist by very elderly people, who were active in the struggle. And I do name Billy, and I'm a truck driver, so I do name Billy Bob with a Stalin profile. I'm going to be friends with him on the Facebook. And I saw Carlo. I don't know if I first saw Carlo when it was Foreign Policy Review or Blowback, but I know I've been seeing him for a while. And just the passion in his voice and the dedication and the love of art and the love of the truth and of beauty, and he was just a valuable resource in everyone's life, and he's going to be sorely miss. I thought about a brief statement that I could say about him that I think, which is probably some points of contention our show, which I think are more points of agreement than we realize. And Brother Carlo would get mad a lot, and he would call the American populace ninnies very loudly and passionately, and this can be very off-putting, almost insulting if you just observe it randomly without any background. But I think Brother Carlo's frustration and passion came out of a love for the people. Because if you don't love the people and they're stupid and they're being manipulated, you'll be like, fuck them, whatever. But if you see people, the people you came from, in the country you live in, being actively manipulated to hurt us and hurt people around the world, you want that to change, and you have a vision of something better and a better future and a better way to be, it just puts more passion in that frustration. I think his frustration honestly his insult and frustration ironically, I believe, came out of a love for the people and a desire for things to get better.
For sure,
Yeah.
Dust. And thank you guys for sharing that with us. It's a struggle for me to articulate, but what definitely, one of the things that struck me about Carlo was, like you guys both hit on it, he was so well read, and he would always reference things that I didn't know about, right? Like he would reference philosophical works or artists, and he was constantly doing it, and it just, again, it went to show just what a great mind he had, and how experienced and well read he was, especially compared to us kids, and sometimes it was tedious, because it's like he would go on and about a philosopher or an artist, or a work, and I would have really nothing to say because I had no idea what he was referencing. But you know what, our other guests did. I mean, he would always have long discussions with, like, Chris Black or John. I forget John's last name. But and you could tell that they had both experienced the same the same work, and they would talk about it, and we would just be sitting on the side twiddling our thumbs. But it was a learning experience. So I was thinking of, my favorite work from Carlo, and I've already posted it on Facebook, and so probably everybody watching has already read his work, and it's called it was like a draft colloquy on CIA, and I didn't even know what a colloquy was. I still don't know what a colloquy is, and I don't even know if I'm pronouncing it right. But that was a piece of art that I could truly appreciate, and it just went line by line, describing a crime that the CIA has done, and then saying, and so compared to that, Putin's not that bad. And it would just go on and on and on. And there had to have been like a list of like 30 or 40 crimes committed by the CIA. And then it would crescendo into all the regime changes and all the, so it was just a really great piece. And I was thinking of reading it, or not, but that was always, of all the poems that, and he's had many books, he's written many books on poetry as well. But that was definitely my favorite one, probably because of the political aspect of it. So I'll mention one more time, in the Facebook comment section, I put the studio link. If anybody was interested in jumping on stream and saying something, you're more than welcome to. But if not, and that's totally fine as well. So I'm seeing some people in the comments. It's tough. It's a tough morning. People in the comments not being the most friendly.
Well, I think we got some bot. I think no, these are bots. That Goose God is a bot.
Okay.
Block Bonds. I mean, come on, Block Bonds is a bot. Is a bot. I don't know. We got into. I think it's unfortunate this happened on the memorial episode, but we got into a bot
No, that's
algorithm. So just ignore those. I'm seeing those comments too. Just don't even pay attention to them. But okay, Squid. Okay, here's our first. Here's our real guy. Okay, Squid Dad. He's an actual person. Here he is. How are you doing? But yes, for anyone who just logged on, who's not a robot, we're starting this off with a Carlo Memorial. Anyone who wants to jump on and give their 2 cents on Carlo, more than welcome to do so. Billy Bob dropped the link in the comments. And one thing is, I mean, it's been a while. It has been a while. Unfortunately, it has been a while coming, right? Unfortunately, because he's not public, of course, but he would chime in. He would give us updates on his health. His wife would give us updates on his health sometimes, and it wasn't just when it did eventually happen. It wasn't a surprise. So I guess that's both a good and a bad thing. On one side, because it was, I suppose, in a way, a good thing. It surprised us when it finally did happen, but still, it's kind of terrible because we were also kind of anticipating it to an extent. So
Yeah, he had a long struggle with cancer, and he had missed a bunch of shows for like several months in a row while he was getting treatment. So he had explained that he had qualified to get an experimental cancer treatment for free, and then he was worried that he got it free for a year, and it really helped. And he came back on the show stronger than ever because there were some days he would come on our show, and you could tell he was weak and tired. And so I mean, a couple times he would fall asleep. He wasn't looking that good. But then whatever he was taking, this experimental drug, really did seem to help. And after that episode, he came back and he was the old Carlo for several months. And so it was just really fortunate that we were able to get that. And then he caught a cough, and then the cough turned into pneumonia, and then he had a collapsed lung, and he was on life support. And his immune system just was not strong enough to take all that. So I do have this draft colloquy on CIA. It's kind of long, but I wouldn't mind reading it.
Well, how long is long?
It's quite long and repetitive. I'm not sure if it's necessary before a few lines. Your description of it was rather eloquent.
Okay. No, we can leave it at that. No, I appreciate your guys' feedback, so we'll just leave it at that. But yeah, the other thing I wanted to kind of contemplate on was, and I hit on it earlier, but it's really it's all of our struggle, and it's the struggle against the Ninnies, and he waged a tremendous battle against the Ninnies, and ultimately, we have to continue where he left off, but can we just talk about that aspect of things? I mean, because it is really up to us. It's our struggle to try to, develop the kind of unity that can, create a political force that can, actually force improvements in this country. And so to do that, we have to overcome this idea that that Carlo referred to as the Ninnies. And you guys have any thoughts on that aspect, like why it's so difficult to get through to certain, to most people, and why the apathy, why the confusion, why are they beholden to these ideas that are entirely disconnected from reality. Any thoughts on that aspect of things, guys?
Yeah, I tended to agree with Carlo on a number of issues more than you guys, and I think it's needed. And what I think Carlo had that is often lacking on the program and lacking in certain segments of what I call the left, regardless of if they decide to call themselves that, um, is a need. The frustration is rooted in the recognition of a political reality that the U.S. populace is used to maintain internal national oppression held up by racism, as well as, largely racial based, xenophobic based othering and justification of the mass murder of oppressed nations. And I think Carlos' frustration with the American masses is legitimate and needed. I mean, I usually side with y'all that people are reformable, or they need to be, if we have any hope of building any power to address imperialism and the way people here are manipulated. We need to, and they can, but I don't think that we can unless we recognize the reality, which is, racism, sexism, anti-communism, years of indoctrination. Like I'm all for reaching even people who support fascists, like Trump. I think our core base is definitely the lower section of the working class and the oppressed, who more likely have the material incentive because they have less to lose. Well, you can reach the broader masses, the more middle class, the petty bourgeois, the Trump supporters. I think they can and should be reached, but there's a danger. And you've got to address the racism. You have to say it exists. You can't gloss over it. You can't just say it's manipulated. You got to address the reality. And I think Carlo recognized that reality. And I think if we are going to overcome the indoctrination, overcome the existing hatred, overcome these things, we have to address it. We have to passionately root it out and do that. And I think Carlo recognized it, and he had to fight for it. And I think we should continue his work and continue his legacy in that regard.
So that's very interesting to hear you say that, Dust. And I take credit for you articulating what you just said clearly and loudly. I take full credit for that. That's kind of a joke, because I think we would argue with that, and that was definitely something that I would argue with you about, and then I would argue with Carlo about. And it's a nuanced situation. But I would always thought that you guys kind of overly demonized, the people that you just described. And so I appreciate to hear you say that we have to, and that they are reachable, and we have to reach out to them, because that's all I'm really saying as well. And so, of course, with in that outreach, there are dangers, like you said, and there is a proper way to do it. Of course, we do not want to pander to racists or legitimize racism, or even pretend that it's not real. And so that's absolutely true. But it seems like, I know in the past it's frustrating to have this discussion, because it's like, because sometimes it seems like what I'm saying, you're arguing against something that I'm not saying. And so like you're arguing against a position that suggests we should pander to racists, and I don't believe that. And that's where the difficulty in communication is, and the frustration. But yeah, speaking of passion, nobody had more passion than Carlo, and that is an absolute fact. And to his credit, sometimes the passion would cause a little bit of breakdown in our ability to discuss and communicate, but that made him all the more lovable.
Yes, and I think what Dust said about, well, yes, especially the othering. I mean, that's really what keeps this internal division alive, is the othering of other groups. And it's interesting how the prison house of nations, right? That's a criticism that's well, I mean, it's not even a criticism; it's propaganda that's dressed up as legitimate, fair and balanced criticism of the other countries. Like, the most famous. I mean, it goes back a while. The Russian Empire was the first country I think that term was used against, but they also dressed it up for China, right? Because China allegedly, oppresses those poor Muslims. There's Tibet. Oh no, poor Tibet. And they dress it up against these adversary countries, but really it's the USA. It's projection. Every criticism is projection. It's the USA that's a prison house of nations, and does that othering. It's both an external and an internal weapon. So I think on that point, everybody on the show agreed with Carlo on the main points. And the points that really matter, I think everybody agrees for sure.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, Carlo was a comrade, and our disagreements, were of more ancillary issues, and we were all lockstep on core issues. What else? I mean, yeah. Carlo definitely had some axes to grind, and with good reason. So he definitely had an anti-Trump axe. Definitely was no fan of Trump, and he did not want to countenance any any perspective of Trump that Trump ain't so bad, because that's one way to get Carlo fired up real quick.
I think he lived long enough to have axes to grind. I think he outlived. Literally, I think he outlived some of his exes. You know what I mean? Like, there might be. I mean, I'm sure there's some guy from like the 1970s that he's pissed off about, but that guy died first. So, may I outlive some of my exes? It's long life can be a blessing. You get to see the other guy drop first. I think so. You should see the good along with the bad. He had a very, very full life.
I honestly think we all need an axe to grind against Trump. Like, I think he was Trump. Like, this show, what has promoted too much, too many. I believe too many illusions in Trump's manipulation. He was never an anti-imperialist. He was always an imperialist or racist, and honestly, it's come to fruition. Trump is essentially Reagan's policies, which Clinton took on, in major escalatory mode. Like, we're seeing mass cutting of benefits, getting rid of basically all the taxes we had on the wealthy are gone. They're raising healthcare costs. We don't even have a labor board right now. Like there's so much that is disgusting. Mass deportations, military occupations. Like, anybody on the left should be very angry with Trump's escalations. And those escalations are beyond what the Biden regime was doing. And I think if a Democrat gets elected, they're probably going to continue that. But still, he's an enemy, and he's an imperialist enemy who is doing major escalations against our class in a variety of ways, and using the most vile and disgusting sentiments of racism, xenophobia, transphobia within the population to justify these escalations against our entire class.
No, Dust, great topic, and let me try and weigh in on that in a particular way. I think one of the things that I try to maybe that it is first and foremost in my mind is the partisan politics. And so I am very, very wary of saying anything or doing anything that makes it sound like the Democrats are the answer. And so for that reason, I am very quick when somebody denounces Trump. I say all true, and which makes him just as bad as all the rest of them. There's an idea that I think causes conflict between us, and because if I articulate it, it's kind of as if you think, the Republicans are a little bit worse than the Democrats. And I think I kind of don't want to go there. And I try and I say, no, like, if you start thinking in those terms, you've lost, because now, you don't see the reality for what it is. And, it's a two-party system where both parties work for the same people. And it's like, one cop might, play the role of good cop, but they need each other and they're on the same team. And so there's not, to say one is worse than the other. I think I'm reticent to accept that. You know what I'm saying? And so that's what's really causes some of the the arguments that we've had. At the same time, of course, like, you can see Trump behaving and doing these crazy things that, are a bit over the top and somewhat, and you could say unprecedented in certain ways. And so, the reality is complicated, but that's always what makes me want to push back on the Trump derangement syndrome. And I'm not saying that you have that, but you definitely see that with certain people. And so any kind of universal declaration of Trump is the root of all evil, I kind of just reject that, because I think that leads to this kind of thinking that, well, we're going to just vote blue no matter who because it's better than Trump, and that's just not a solution. But I mean, I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm just trying to explain, the position that I kind of take that has caused some of the disagreements that we've had. And a lot of it, I think, is we're talking past each other, because I'm not saying that you have Trump derangement syndrome, and I'm not saying you're saying the Democrats are a lesser evil, even though in certain ways they might be, just like the good cop who decides, we're not going to, no, let's give him a cigarette instead of, slamming his balls in the drawer, is the better cop. He's the nicer cop. But they're still, working together and on the same side against us. Anyway, any thoughts on that, Dust?
Oh, I have thought. So I think.
Sorry, Ian. Sorry, Dust.
Especially in the last few months, what's frustrating with Trump and the America First movements that did market. And this is them. This isn't anything I'm projecting onto them. This is them. They marketed themselves as the new hegemony. All right, even there was oh my gosh, in their big rallies, how they were like, we're this time, last time Trump went as an individual, this time he's a team. They really marketed themselves as the next hegemony, that they're tearing down the liberal establishment, replacing it with the MAGA establishment, that they're tearing down globalism, that they're America first. But the problem is they're not. I think it's annoying to everybody, regardless of where you are on the political spectrum. It's annoying because he flip-flops on everything. It does seem like, and everybody said this, both liberals and conservatives and every right-wingers, left-wingers have all said this, is like whoever talked to him last sways him. I don't know if he's getting senile or what his deal is, or if he put too many neocons in his. I even actually kind of said, well, I remember even when I was on this show, I was kind of defending that decision. It's like, well, if he's making a compromise with, the old guard's Republican Party, little Rubio bringing those fucktards onto his, excuse my language, put those guys on his administration, that could represent a compromise. But as far as I can tell, they're just walking all over him. Little Rubio's doing whatever he wants, and they're swaying. And like, I don't know if he's just gotten too old or what the hell Trump's problem is, but that's not America first. And Russians ask me, because I'm the American in town, right? So they ask me what's going on with Trump. And I think from the Russian perspective, they want to know, is this like somebody they should take, from a diplomatic perspective, is this someone they should take seriously and make long-term commitments with? But they've so like, and it's actually, which is funny because they're so important. It's so important to Trump to display strength, but I think internationally they're displaying the opposite. To an extent, to Europe maybe they're displaying strength because he did get the European Union to obey him, do whatever he wants. I think to neutral and hostile countries, he's displaying weakness. And because Russia's like, Russia made all these offers. They were willing to, there were things they wanted from Trump, and there were concessions Russia was willing to make, right? There were some fairly big concessions.
Yeah.
And now they don't know what to think. It's like, what is even the point of talking to this guy?
Yeah.
So that's my 2 cents on the whole situation.
Did you have something to say? Because I mean, I have something if you don't, but I'm sure you might.
Yeah, I want to go ahead and respond. And I think, well, first of all, it's clear that Trump is and has always been a tool of the imperialists. And there's no question. Like, there was no need to question it. There was never a need to question it. He was never going to be an opportunity, even to be a gear in the system. No, he was their gear in the system for their destruction. There was no hope in Trump or Trumpism whatsoever that we should abide to. And the other thing is, I think there is a tendency within the left, which is a type of it's both ultra left and right tailing simultaneously. And that is the dismissal of everyone who ever told you to lesser evil vote. Like some groups, dedicated organizers, people in labor unions, people actually doing work for our class, who took a position which I disagree with, which is you should lesser evil vote Democrats. Or honestly, we have so little power in voting. Even if people were to say lesser evil vote Trump, if they were actively engaged in organizing, I would say, okay, that they're wrong, but we're not going to dismiss them. So I have trouble with the groups in the left who dismiss other groups simply based off lesser evil voting. I think voting is so inconsequential to the point where organizing is primary, and if someone is doing the work, that's what matters. And there's also like a dismissal of people like Mondani, I think there was a mass movement behind him, and I think there's people no longer demonizing, especially among the youth, the term socialism within democratic social. I see Bernie Sanders as a sheepdog imperialist, but when Bernie Sanders criticizes the more neoliberal Democrats caving in, I know we're going to talk about the shutdown soon. When Bernie Sanders criticizes the more neoliberal or caving into the Republicans' harsh austerity budget, he's correct on that. Even if he has been used to tell people to vote for Zionists, imperialist war criminals like Hillary Clinton, he's still correct on that point. And Mondani, who takes a better position on Palestine than Sanders does. Sanders he could be called a Zionist, and honestly, Mondani could be called a Zionist. Anybody who recognizes any who supports recognized is a Zionist, but he's better than the hardcore. And he's the mayor of New York City. He's not actively engaged in foreign policy. I think there is some nuances that need to be addressed, and I think we need to stop dismissing other people in the movement based off electoral politics, one way or the other. And there's certain political realities and avenues of organizing that need to be understood and addressed.
Well, when you say the imperialists, Trump represents the imperialists. Maybe we just need some clarification, because that can mean, well, I mean, you know what I'm saying? It can mean a lot of different things. Like, so we say Trump is an imperialist. Okay, we accept. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. Well, Trump's not an imperialist, but what does that mean? Like, does that mean he's going to double down in Eastern Europe? Does it
Well,
mean he's going to leave Eastern Europe?
no,
What's it mean?
I think it's power. He's a reflection of his base, and people, and there's too much. I think there's too much illusions in the people, as if the people Trump manipulated are a real political base. And I think no. I think the imperialists allowed and put Trump in the power, and they will shut him down, and will do what he wants. He is there to manipulate people. You see what I'm saying? There is not really a MAGA movement. It doesn't really exist. It falls apart the instant without Trump. So when Trump coming to office, because he was put in the power by the imperialists, there was no hope of him fulfilling any of his promises, because that isn't what the people that put him to power wanted. And the MAGA movement was little more than a manipulation of the people against their interest that would fall apart the instant it didn't serve the people that it was built for.
Can I make 2 points? I got 2 points. The first, Ian, you want to go first? You can go first.
No, go ahead. I say go ahead. Sorry.
Okay.
Good.
Well, okay. So I think what nobody is bringing up is the reality of inter-ruling class conflict, right? Where you have factions of billionaires going after each other to a point, right? And so this is really what passes itself off as politics in the United States is, 2 billionaire factions trying to control the levers of power, trying to control the presidency, and wanting to put forth their understanding of what strategy is best to pursue their best billionaire interests. But there is an inter-billionaire conflict. And so this is what causes people to suspect that Trump is really on their side, right? Because when they see what has been the faction of billionaires in power for a while going after Trump and doing everything they can, with the Ukraine gate and with the Russia gate to sink him and to make sure that, he doesn't come to power. That makes people that don't understand that there's an inter-ruling class conflict. They think that, it's the ruling class that's going after him, so he must be fighting for, the working class. And it's just a fundamental misperception about the reality of what's going on. And I think in the United States, you have this clash between oligarchs that's stage managed and isn't really real. Because if it was really real, they would have known who put that pipe bomb, in Washington, D.C. for the Stop the Steal March. They would have known that 5 years ago. So they have this kid glove inter-billionaire rivalry where they're never really going to air the dirty laundry about what each side does to the American people. So I
want to interject just to explain what Billy Bob is referring to. There was, well, I don't know if this is actually, correct me if I'm wrong, Billy Bob, this is what you're referring to. There was some news and some right-wing websites claiming that sources in the FBI had said that they just recently figured out independently that the pipe bomber on January 6th was a member of the Capitol Police. And they actually identified this woman by name. And what was actually particularly interesting about her is that she actually resigned her position in the Capitol Police and went to work at the CIA. So it's like, well, I mean, it's like truth stranger than fiction. You had several hundred, what was the number? 300, 400 FBI agents in the crowd they were throwing smoke bombs, and they then the pipe bomber, that was like, I mean, they wouldn't, I mean, I remember that at the time, like, especially the first couple of weeks after January 6th, the media would not shut up about that pipe bomber. Like, it's like Al-Qaeda, it's like 9/11, and it was a fucking cop who did it. It's like, are you serious? Yeah. It's not surprising either. Yeah.
No, and so to me, to understand what December 6th was, it was an effort by one faction of the ruling class to sink Trump's chances and to create this spectacle that would, help them to facilitate, the political destruction of Trump. and so they attempted and they used it. But and so this is just kind of the way that politics works in the United States and in the West. It's not real politics, because real politics is class struggle, and it's which class will be represented in government. Is it going to be a government that represents the working class majority, or is it going to be an oligarchy? Is it going to be a government paid for and bought off by the billionaire ownership class? And so what politics ends up being, and what politics has always been, is that the ownership class divides itself up into two parties and allows the working class to pick a side. And that is never going to get us where we need to go. And that's the reality of liberalism. And that's and socialists oppose that. Socialists say, no, we want a government of and by the working class. Ian, you had something to say?
Well, yeah, I think you're not wrong. If there's some, and earlier on the show, I attempted to identify it as the lower half of the ownership class rebelling against the upper financial half of the capitalist class, and define it as the people who actually own the factories, who actually have skin in the game in the Rust Belts. We're like, this is not sustainable, what we're doing, and they rebelled against the financial sector of the capitalist class who just thought you don't need an economy, you can just have AI and sell shitcoin to each other and sell $20 lattes to each other, and that's an economy. But I don't know what to say, because it's like the whole America First movement just seems to have fallen apart on itself. But at the same time, I can see there's a crisis, and because I was actually looking at this today, because the U.S. economy has allegedly the largest economy in the world in nominal GDP of $29 trillion.
Yeah.
Right. But if you look at that GDP, 10 companies make up more than half, and 3 companies, NVIDIA, Microsoft, and Apple, make up 13 by themselves, 13 trillion. And a lot of that is the AI bubble.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, it's just imagine how big of a collapse that could be. Because we're not talking steel industry, we're not talking energy, we're not talking nukes, we're not talking, tangible assets. It's just imaginary assets with money that we printed. I do want to segue that maybe Dust will have something to say, or you have something to say. Oh, we lost Dust. I'm sure he'll be back. He probably just lost signal. But I think to segue this into the shutdown, that just the Democrats capitulated first. It looks like that's what the news is saying. There's a mutiny in the Democratic Party. Some switched sides and voted for the compromise. I think I don't know. There's a lot of different triggers for that, but I think just the fact we have an unsustainable inflationary economy, and EBT and food stamps, SNAP came up a lot. A lot of a lot of the rhetoric around it is very toxic. There's a lot of finger pointing, accusations of freeloading and all that. But I think, Dust is back. I'm going to add him to the stage. So I think the main thing is that we have an economy where 42 million people just don't have, you can't even afford groceries, and our economy is built on that because Walmart and several, not just them, several other major employers will employ you and say, here's your form to file for welfare, which is they consider subsidizing, so they don't have to pay you properly. And the problem with that method is that it's inflationary. And by way inflationary, I mean it's like, okay, so the government's printing.
Yeah. Oh.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can. We can see you too. It looks like Ian froze up. Did you want to say something, Dust?
Yeah. I think I think something that's missed.
That's the deep state sentiment, by the way.
I think there's I think there's some misunderstanding of the Trump coalition that brought him into power, and one of the major things that which is lower finance capital, was a major, which he is a part of himself, a land tycoon. Give me a second.
Yeah, go ahead.
No worries.
Yeah, we're gonna mute you, Dust.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so let me jump
Let me
in.
finish
So
my thought. Let me finish my thought. I was gonna say it's
okay, go ahead.
inflationary. Well, imagine you have, so the government prints money, gives it to people so they can buy food, and they can buy housing, and of course, this is a capitalist market economy. The prices of those things go up, which prompts the government to print more money, give it to people, and it's a vicious cycle. It's like giving a blood transfusion to a person who's hemorrhaged, who's just bleeding out, right? Because people are bleeding out. I mean, I'm all done, Dust, but it's just people are bleeding out. People can't afford groceries. People can't afford
Yeah.
housing. Yeah, that's just and it's going to lead to a collapse eventually. It's inevitable. But yeah, go ahead, Dust.
All right, so no, yeah, so one aspect of the Trump coalition was the private equity, the lower financial capital, the landlord class, and another part of it was the petty bourgeois and manufacturers. And it makes sense that the petty bourgeois and the manufacturers want to eliminate all welfare programs, all safety nets, and also immigration, crack down on immigration. Contrary to Trump's promises, when you do mass deportation, or very visible deportations, and harassment, the effect isn't less undocumented workers. The effect is workers who are less likely to fight for their rights, who live in fear. Repression of immigrants usually results in a lowering of wages, not a hiring of wages. So if you compare like Clinton did in the 90s, gutting the welfare, it was all about getting people to work for less. It was being desperate. Either you will work or you will starve. That is the option. And if the more social safety nets we have and we fight for as workers, regardless, even with inflation taken into consideration, the more social safety sets we have, the more welfare programs we have available, the better standard of living there is for the lower portion of the working class, and the more likely they are to go on strike, fight for their wages, and even outside the formal labor movement, like we see in COVID, the more people are to call out or not come in. If you're absolutely desperate and there is no safety net, you're less likely to call out. You're more likely to take substandard jobs. So this part of the coalition, the lower production class, the petty bourgeois, really are the ones pushing for some of the most egregious attacks onto our class through the Trump regime, that the more higher finance capitalists see as possible disruption if they push it too far. So maybe that's a fight within them, but still, as communist organized as working class people, this largely what is historically the basis of fascism within the Trump regime is very dangerous and needs to be fought tooth and nail, both on the repression of immigrants as well as fighting for the basic social safety nets we currently have.
So there's a lot of speculation about these two sides and what section of the ruling class supports Trump, and so a lot of speculation, like you said, Dust, is that it's the petite bourgeoisie, it's the smaller business owners who kind of support him, and that it's the big finance capital that supports the Democrats. Ultimately, it's hard to know with any certainty, and their base of support is constantly changing. You got the tech industry, you've got the small business owners, like you said, and then you have big finance, and it's just difficult for me to have any kind of certainty to say these are the factions at war with each other, and I'm not sure it's that clear cut and dry, but I do know that at least Trump, when he was running for president, that he gave one speech, and you could tell that Trump's speechwriters had me in mind, because unlike Kamala Harris, he had one speech that really resonated with me, and he was telling me what I wanted him to say. And it happened one time, and I remember the speech, and it was about not being imperialist. It was about peace. And I was, of course, I didn't really buy it, and so my whole point was, at least he has, identified the lies that he knows I want to hear. And because Kamala didn't even do that, she didn't ever try and reach out to me. But there was one speech where Trump did, of course, and that's kind of part of Trump's, political acumen, is his ability to tell everybody, or at least a lot of people, what they want to hear at least once. And then, and that's how he maintains, such a high base of support, because everybody's thinking, oh, well, he might not be doing it, but it's not him that is causing it not to be done. It's like people around him are forcing our poor Trump to do this. And that's part of a good politician, right? That's part of being a good, good at politics, is, keeping people unbalanced, making people think that Trump would really like to do something better, and it's just these other people that are keeping him from doing it. Anyway, that was pretty much the only things I wanted to say on those issues. Ian, did you have something any kind of rebuttal?
I mean, the issue is I think the biggest issue with Kamala was that she was denying there was a problem. I mean, because you kind of brought up Kamala just now, and it's like you ask, there's those people with their signs. It's like, if Kamala had won, I would be at brunch right now. And that's what they say. They're very proud of it. They're just denying there's a problem. I don't know how, it's true what Dust says, that, those Rust Belts, petty landlords and, manufacturers, they can see there's a problem. And I hate landlords. I think they should get the guillotine first. I mean, I've never had. I call them slumlords, but we're going off a cliff. I mean, it's just I have my before we went on the show, Billy Bob and I were talking about the VA rating system, and I just assume mine will be gone in 5 years. I just assume that the dollar is going to be toilet paper in 5 years. It's going to be like the Soviet ruble or the Confederate dollar. That's just something that you get 1 million of them, and you use them to light your fireplace. I think we're headed towards a period of extreme austerity, like what Greece had in 2008, 2009. The EU kind of gave them, and the thing about the EU at the time is that when Greece went off that cliff, they didn't save him from the cliff. They gave him a push. They said, okay, but the difference is it's a major economy that's having that shock therapy economics. And
so you're thinking a burst AI bubble will cause a recession, and
I think there's going to be a very
just implement austerity.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a period of very severe austerity, and it's just I would hate for that to happen. I mean, I would hate for it to happen to me first and foremost, but I'd hate for that for people who are getting, people who are getting Medicare or getting, just they need this stuff to, just keep their family off the street, for all that to collapse. I don't know how that can even be. I mean, we're so far into it. I don't even know how it can be avoided at this point. And so it's very frustrating to go on, to talk to Americans back in America, to go on Facebook, go on social media and ask them about this. And they're like, well, there's no problem. They just say, other problems. Like, well, what the hell are you talking about? Right? Like, I don't even understand how people cannot realize there's a problem when we're 38 trillion.
Well, the last time a bubble burst and it caused a recession, China stepped in big time and help to stabilize global markets and help to stabilize the United States market. And I mean, China, of course, would do it again, you know, if if that happens and they're asked to,
I don't
because
think that,
China's not going to benefit from the U.S. having a recession.
I don't
But
think
it's
sensible. It's like, imagine if a third of the American economy, just imagine a third, like let's just say $10 trillion of the U.S. economy, which is not an exaggeration. It could just be $10 trillion just gone overnight. What are we going to do about that? What are we going to do when there's because there's 40, and I think this is what spooked. This might, I don't
they're
know.
going to declare a crisis and start some wars.
Yeah, I don't know. Because it's scary. I think that's what ended the shutdown because I think that spooked some people just realizing, well, there's 42 million people who literally don't have the money to buy dinner. And there's no other, I don't think there's any other, there's no other developed country on earth that's that deep into the hole, right? Like Russia and China couldn't do that. If Russia said, 15% of our population can't buy food or housing, so the government's just going to pay it. Well, they couldn't because they don't have the money. No normal country that does not have that reserve currency can afford it. The USA can because we have reserve currency and we can just print as much money as we want.
Yeah.
That ends. What are we going to do? It's so serious.
Everybody wants our currency. That's called we're the global reserve currency. All the other countries want it, and they're willing to give us actual stuff for our fake paper. But again, the risk is that we're gonna, that is gonna go away. That people are gonna stop wanting our money, and then we're just gonna be just like every other country, and we're gonna have to start behaving like every other country, which will be great for humanity. Dust, I know you've been listening.
I'm seeing a bit of a disconnect. Okay. Yeah, I'm seeing a bit of a disconnect. And I think what we need to recognize is, as myself, I consider myself a working class person with a revolutionary outlook. I'm not engaged in a party right now. If I was, I'd be a revolutionary, but I consider myself a fellow traveler. And from that revolutionary working class outlook, the petty bourgeois, the employers, the U.S. dollar, the relevance of U.S. Hegemony is not my concern. It is not my concern. Whether that goes up or down has little effect on my well-being. The primary effect on my well-being is how strong working class power is, how strong the labor movement is. So these people who are attacking immigrants, who are cutting or making us pay more for medical care, who are taking away funding to research and funding to education, stuff that actually benefits us, are not our ally just because they don't want the dollar to collapse. They're our enemy. They're straight up our enemy and will always be our enemy. And we should have little care if the dollar collapses tomorrow, because if we have enough labor power, if we have a strong labor movement, we can demand, regardless of what the dollar is worth, we can demand physical resources that we physically produce and are part of the global economy. It's still part of the global economy. It's a class war. And another thing about U.S. hegemony itself, I think, is misunderstood. And the reason why, I don't know what it's called, monetary theory or what have you, but the U.S. debt is almost a fictitious number to the point. The strength of the U.S. hegemony comes from its control over natural resources through countries, through having an allyship with Saudi Arabia, as well as their ability to invade and take other oil producers or limit other oil producers, like sanctions on Iran, destroying Syria. Honestly, it is the strength of the U.S. military, the strength of the ability of U.S. to manipulate countries and overthrow countries to stop resistance, along with their control over oil. You add up those two things, And that's the real power of why U.S. has hegemony. And the financial markets are largely a fictitious representation of that. And as long as they can invade and conquer and overthrow with coups or outright coups, they will have this hegemony. I mean, it's slowly going away, but that's the source of it.
Well,
That sounded complementary to what we were saying. It doesn't sound, contradictory. It sounds complementary. Ian, I'm sorry. Go ahead, sir.
I think saying you don't appreciate the American hegemony is itself a product of the American hegemony. It's like a fish in water, and it is, whether you see it or not, very much tied to the dollar. Um, and I can assure you, Saudi Arabia is not an ally of the USA because they just love America, and they're just going to keep doing. If the U.S. economy and the U.S. dollar collapse, they would just continue doing that. No, they would switch sides. I mean, Saudi Arabia already, actually, not many people know this, but they signed a mutual defense pact with Russia in 2021. It wasn't even recent. It was a few years ago. So they hedged their bets. They will switch to China. I can assure you, Dust, that Saudi Arabia is not an ally of the USA because they just love America. They will switch sides in a heartbeat the second the USA is weak. They don't care. They don't give a shit. And the U.S. dollar is the reason that you're in your truck and you can pull up to a gas station and there's gasoline. When the supply chain, I assure you, if the economy collapses, that supply chain will also be gone. And yes, the physical resources exist, but the infrastructure to get those physical resources to people, especially outside major cities, will be gone. And it's happened. It's not hypothetical. Look at Russia in the 1990s. Look at any country that's had a serious economic crisis. It's not the big thing. I mean, New York City, Chicago, probably be fine. The rural areas, the smaller towns, the farther you go out into the logistical change, they will be the ones who, the workers can come out and make demands, but the reality is just the physical.
So there's two aspects to this discussion about, if there's going to be an economic collapse or not. Mm-hmm. The first thing is, like, none of us have any control over it. The second thing is, should we want it or should we not want it? Obviously, if a global economic, domestic economic collapse adversely affects the American people, we shouldn't want that, but yet again, we have no control over it. But what would like if the American people are adversely affected and it affects the ability of the United States to engage in the imperialism that they have been engaged in since 1945, like there's an upside and a downside to it. Now, the last thing I wanted to say was, I feel that if there is a serious domestic pain economically for the masses, it'll still be less pain than the rest of the world. I think our owners are going to make sure that if we feel pain, that it's not going to be as severe as other parts of the world. Like, they're going to make sure that Europe feels a lot more pain. They're going to make sure, Asia feels a lot more pain, or they're going to try, right? So pain might come, but they'll be able to say, hey, it could be a lot worse, and it's not our fault. It's these other people's fault. But that's all speculation. I think I don't want my privileged economic existence to I don't want to sacrifice. I don't want to sacrifice my economic well-being. But at the same time, I know that if I do, that there might be a silver lining, and it might be the end of imperialism and benefit for all these other countries that are victims of imperialism that might benefit from my sacrifice. But that's kind of what I want to say.
So I almost said Carlo. He's with us in spirit. I literally almost said Carlo. What is Carlo? Oh my gosh. I was going to say, that's an easy answer. That's an easy question to answer. You don't want that, because like you said, you do have a privileged existence, but we have. Well, I don't even. I don't even like the term privileged existence. I like a blessed, and see, it's kind of a religiously or ideologically loaded term, but something like your grandma says. But I like it. It's like you are blessed. You are blessed with a good, comfortable life, and there's no reason to feel guilty for it. But also, losing it doesn't benefit anybody. I mean, it doesn't. I mean, it's tempting to think, oh well, the USA. That's loud. Thank you, Dust. Thank you for muting yourself. It doesn't benefit. I mean, it's tempting to say, well, if the USA collapsed, that would help people in Libya, that would help people in Iraq, it would help people in Afghanistan, it would help people in Vietnam, it would help all these people that we. I don't think that's actually true. Because one, if the USA had a serious, if U.S. hegemony, because I know earlier you said that Billy Bob, we were talking about the U.S. economy. Well, the U.S. economy and U.S. hegemony are linked, entwined, as Anthony
Gus made
Blinken
that point.
Yeah. Um, Anybody who's even tangentially connected to the U.S. economy, which is that's a large portion of the world, is going to be hurt by that. If the U.S. Just like in 2008, and also I just think for the balance of power, if we're talking about, because on this show we talk, I mean that's a major theme of this show, multipolarity, right? Well, to be a multipolar world, you need multiple poles. You can't even just have two poles. You need at least three poles to be a multipolar world. So the U.S. does serve as a pole, and it is good to have more because if the USA really had serious problems and just stopped being a world power, even temporarily, that would leave Russia and China. I mean, because let's be honest, Europe at this point is kind of through their own choices. The U.S. didn't hold a gun to Germany and force them to de-industrialize. They're through their own choices. They stopped being a world power. So it's just Russia, China, and the USA at this point. And I don't think even the Russians or the Chinese want the U.S. to just drop out. It's too disruptive.
Yeah, no, their interests wouldn't be served with a U.S. economic collapse. Yeah, go ahead, Dest.
Yeah, I think hopefully y'all can hear me. I'm loading and unloading and working and stuff, but I think probably what's misunderstood about my position, I think the U.S. empire collapse is inevitable. We can't. There's no hope in jumping into a sinking boat and trying to stop it from sinking. That is not going to improve the lives of American workers. There is one thing that can improve the lives of the working class in the U.S., and that is building workers' power. That is the only thing that can help us. Building power that has the ability to demand real wages, to demand benefits, whether they be private or government. That is our focus, and that is what we need to be doing. And we can make alliances with other people who have the same enemy, which is our imperialist class here, and that is my position. That is what we should be doing, which means uniting with the immigrant workers, uniting with all type of workers, and focusing on that lower section of the workers who has less to lose and who is willing to make more sacrifices to build the power. And we can build independent infrastructure to not only to make demands but fulfill our own needs in the needs of in the inevitable collapse.
Yeah, and I don't know who could disagree with that. It's totally true. I think given the current material conditions, it's just a very difficult task. But as the material conditions shift and change, I think that's when the opportunities really open up. And so, yeah, I mean, it's an ongoing, never-ending work. But I agree with the focus, and I agree that the most revolutionary people are those people with the least to lose. And so definitely we should have an outreach to them, and organize them and get them on board with the certain political realities that we see. Um, but I don't think we don't need to exclude, and we don't need to be rigid about our approach. We don't have to demand that other people share our exact approach and our exact strategy, especially now when there's really no strategy that's going to be effective, and we can just see due to the obstacles that we have to overcome, like we don't control the platforms of mass communication. We don't control the ideas that enter into people's minds. We have no control over that. We have no ability to to put ideas into people's minds except on our very, very small individual basis. And so I don't think we should be rigid. I love that strategy. I love that approach. I love your efforts, but we should allow other people to have maybe different ideas and to utilize their own approach. And I don't think there's anything wrong with letting different people do their own thing. And if they feel they have an outreach to the petite bourgeoisie, go for it. And again, it's kind of like I grew up in the church, and that's kind of what the church teaches. Everybody comes with their own talents and their own abilities to proselytize, and then together they make up the entire body. And so you're doing your thing, I'm doing my thing, and then other people are doing their thing. And we got to have tolerance. We got to have an understanding that not everybody is going to do things exactly how we think they should be done, and we can have disagreements. And again, there are red lines. There are red lines that no, you can't pander to racism. You can't say, oh, racism is okay, come and join the Communist Party. I agree with that. But at the same time, we do have to have some leeway. Anyway, it's a big, broad reality, and it's there's no one single approach. Is I guess my point. But any thoughts, Dutch or Ian? Because
I don't really like the revolutionary defeatism. If I'm using the wrong term, I apologize. I think that's the correct terminology. Revolutionary defeatism, or revolutionary suicide, as Hugh Newton put it. Because I mean, it's already a victory. I think there's already a victory for socialism, because basically every American, regardless of political persuasion, whether he's left wing or right wing, is in favor of socialism. And the reason for that is because the free market, I'm not even talking about capitalism, just free market, invisible hand, laissez-faire economics has been such a total farce, not even a failure, a farce. Just a few oligarchs control everything, and everybody else becomes a wage slave, serf, renter. And no one younger than 40 even remembers when the country was prosperous. So if you talk, I mean, pretty much anybody, I mean, really, whether that person is a Republican or a Democrat, I mean, you can get pretty much all of them to agree with socialism, even if they don't call it that.
No,
so I think.
Okay, I really want to respond to that and concur, but I don't want to cut Dust off if he has some.
Well, let me just finish my thought.
I'm sorry.
So I think within 20, the only thing holding us back are those older people who remember when you could buy a house for $20. You could work a part-time job at the grocery store and go to college and buy a house and have your 2 cars. Those are the people who are resisting socialism. But just to be brutally honest, when those people die off, I think we'll have socialism, because everybody will want socialism. Be like, why the hell don't we have socialism? And those people who are against socialism will be dead, literally. There's no need for, I think at this point, there's no need for defeatism. There's obviously people in favor of open borders and immigration. There's people against immigration, but those are different issues. right? I mean, if you talk to a 25-year-old young Republican, he'll say, "Well, I'm absolutely against immigration. We need to close the borders." You talk to a 25-year-old communist or anarchist, he'll say, "Well, that's a state. The state it's fascism. We need open borders." Well, I mean that they can work it out, right? Um, but they both agree. Well, that socialism is a good thing. Whether it's a right wing or a left wing regime, they both agree socialism is a good thing. And it's very much a generational thing. I think the USA will have socialism within 20 years. We just need to not collapse. I don't want to collapse. I don't want my money to become worthless. I don't want to have to work in a grocery store in Moscow.
And by socialism, you mean a government that's more representative of the working class?
I think it's more. Oh my gosh, I don't want to get into how to define socialism. I think we're going to have something that more resembles Europe, what like the Nordic state. I think we'll have socialist healthcare, single payer healthcare. I think we'll have. We might even, God help me for even saying this, we might even have universal basic income or housing subsidies, family subsidies. If you have a kid, we'll get. I think we'll have all those things within 20 years.
Well, we're already going to be getting some Trump bucks.
Yeah,
everybody's getting Trump bucks.
I mean, just the fact that Trump is talking about Trump bucks shows how socialist the USA has become.
Right, and didn't he acquire like 15% of NVIDIA? NVIDIA, he socialized 15% of NVIDIA. Dust, I would like to offer you to come on in.
Yeah, I think that concept is incredibly naive. For that to be existence, there would actually have to be democratic control of the system, and there's not. The majority of people already support universal health care. The majority of people already support free college. The majority of the people already support all these things. You wouldn't know that from looking at the mainstream media. They do, but we don't have these things. And it's figures like Trump who are able to manipulate racism, transphobia, and all these other reactionary sentiments within the masses to convince them to vote against their own interest and back the more austere party, which is the Republican Party that rules the South and largely rural areas. And in those sections where Republicans are in control, there is by far worse conditions, worse schools, more poverty. Like that's how they do it. They manipulate people's reaction to get them to vote against their own interest, and then
it sounds like what Ian is saying. He's saying that the ruling class is going to develop such a crisis of legitimacy that they're going to have to start pandering to the working class because of this crisis of legitimacy. And so it wouldn't be that different from what FDR did. He's saving capitalism. He's maintaining
instead
capitalism.
That's what they're doing. There's already a crisis.
There's going to be some temporary policies, temporary pretense that they are actually representing workers by doing these things that he listed. So it's an interesting take. I agree with you. I wouldn't call that socialism because socialism is a party that actually represents the people instead of a party representing the billionaires feeling that they have to make concessions due to a crisis of legitimacy. So it's just kind of two different things. But I can't say that Ian's wrong. I can't say that that's absolutely not going to happen, that they won't feel like they have to give some huge concessions because they don't want us becoming revolutionaries. But it's an interesting discussion.
I think I think it's fair. I mean, Gus made a fair criticism. So let me explain it a bit more. I mean, because when I just mean socialism, I'm going beyond what's left wing or right wing. People just younger, because the government is the people. I mean, because literally, even if you had a king or an emperor or a dictator, I mean, he is a person, right? Government are people. Like Mitt Romney said, corporations are people. I mean, it's to an extent literally true. A nation is has national values, and those national values are determined by whoever those people are. And the reality is that Americans are much more socialists than they were
Yeah.
20 years ago, and I think that's just the reality. It's even when you have Congress and Senate full of millennials, I think millennials are just going to be like, well, of course. I mean, so you have left. I think pretty much every left wing person agrees with, ultra leftist ideas, on healthcare, on property, on social safety nets. But you can also, even on the right, you have nationalists, national. Even if it's a very nationalist government, you're still going to have a socialist system, if that makes sense, regardless of which faction wins. You're going to have a very socialist. The kind of thing that would make a boomer very upset. Like, oh my God, that's literally communism. That's literally the Soviet Union. It's literally Maoist China. The kind of thing that'd make them.
That's what we're seeing on social media is right wingers becoming apoplectic about this trajectory of people's ideas shifting and being more open to socialism and more opposed to capitalism, because that's definitely the trend that's happening among young people. And it's freaking out the libertarian types, the right wingers who I see all the time on social media. But I do want to. I had one last point to make, and this is just kind of agreeing with what everybody's saying here. It's the material conditions are going to have to change for for us to develop a powerful coalition, for things to change progressively in a progressive way. But I think we kind of see the material conditions changing right now, and I think Trump is a symptom of the material conditions changing. And I think what I see on social media, okay, Candace Owens and Dave Smith. So these are two like libertarian right-wing figures, and both of them, like, I am watching their episodes because they're entertaining, and I like to, I feel I learn by watching them. But it seems like the fact that reality has a Marxist bias is dawning on them. And I heard Candace Owens just yesterday saying, I'm beginning to think that it's not left versus right. It's like the oligarchs versus the rest of them. I'm like, you're getting it, girl. It's like, reality has a Marxist bias. The more that you try and figure out and clue into what the fuck is going on with reality, the more of a Marxist you're going to be. And I see this with Dave Smith now. Like, it's just baby steps. Like, they're just beginning to understand, how things work, and they're going to have to get rid of a lot of nonsense to fully appreciate things. But I can see this taking place, and so to me, that is evidence. That is the actual material conditions changing right in front of my eyes. And I think it's getting more and more difficult for the ruling class to maintain this facade of democracy and this is the be all end all of a political system is Republican democracy or a democratic republic, right? And there's no evolution that needs to take place, because again, a democratic republic is just a facade for oligarchy. It's just the whole ideology to obscure and obfuscate the reality of oligarchy. And I think it's going to be much more difficult for them going forward to maintain this facade, and I can see it crumbling. And it's this crisis of legitimacy. And I'm optimistic. I'm definitely not a revolutionary defeatist. Exactly how it plays out, exactly what steps the oligarchy takes to maintain the system is, what we're going to find out in the next, few weeks, months, years. It's an hour and 30 minutes in. You guys are really good to listen to me diatribe. But I would like to get other any thoughts before we wrap it up, guys? Ian or Dust?
Yeah, I just there's a few direct points that I could be quick on, and I could, first of all, I'll go over briefly the definitions. Revolutionary defeatism, Marx, Lenin, Stalin, Mao, was the idea in an imperialist country your main enemy is your own capitalist class. So essentially, you're supporting the working class against your enemy, and anyone you can ally against that enemy can be allied with. That's that. And then revolutionary suicide comes from Huey Newton, who was part of an oppressed nation in the United States, and basically the conditions of fascism in the United States. Are fascism for the oppressed, to the point where any resistance, their strength is so strong, they if you resist, they will kill you, and they killed him, and that's revolutionary suicide. So those are those two definitions, and it doesn't really have anything to do with cheering on or. To an extent, yeah, it is cheering on the collapse of your imperialists, but it's more of an emphasis on the working class than it is that. And in Huey Newton's case, it was a recognition that they will kill me if I continue, and they did. And the other point is, we live in a dictatorship of the bourgeoisie. So even if their illusion, their facade falls, it doesn't mean we're going to just magically get socialism. The other option is further repression and fascism, which with Trumpism, we are going down that road. And it's very clearly progressed. And it's continued and progressed under Democrats. Fascism, further repression, further austerity, further separation, utilizing hate. Hate of people based on gender, based on race, based on immigrant status. That's all progressing towards fascism, and it's being done under Democrats and Republicans alike. It's just majorly escalated under Trump. And I think the one last point on immigration is from a proletarian revolution perspective. It's not being pro-immigration or anti-immigration. I think the majority of people don't like forced migration. They don't like countries in extreme poverty and people being forced. It's about organizing working class power, which means organizing the most exploited workers who have the most incentive. So it's basically organizing all workers regardless of documented status to build a political base for power. So it's about defending and fighting for all workers. It's not about being pro immigration.
No, I appreciate your perspective and clarifying those things from your point of view.
I think we need to look at in the context of the Russian Revolution. The Russian Revolution started in World War One, and in that context, the imperial system had failed to such an extent. Even the most prosperous areas in the Russian Empire, Moscow and St. Petersburg, or Petrograd as they renamed it, had breadlines, right? The system had failed so extensively. Even the most privileged and well-to-do people in the system were waiting in the street for bread, and that's the conditions that communism succeeded, because the previous system had failed. And actually, even more than that, I mean, it failed so extensively, even the emperor himself abdicated, which I think he was the first Russian Empire. No one else, the rest just died. He was the first to actually abdicate the throne. That's how seriously the system failed. Then you had the interim government, which also failed to resolve the economic problems. But what I'm really, maybe I'm not being clear enough on this show, but I'm really just saying we don't need a collapse in the USA. We don't need, we don't need where where we have the most oppressed people, and say, well, we don't need breadlines. We're just going to rebel and we're going to storm the Capitol. I don't know if I should say storm the Capitol on YouTube, but I mean visits the Capitol during regularly posted hours. I think you understand what I'm saying. We don't.
So Yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree. The future is not written. You would not like to, you're not advocating for a violent revolution. You think that would be unfortunate, that we can have a peaceful change of
Transition,
power.
right?
Yeah, no, and yeah, that would be great. And I agree with you. Preferentially, um, if we could just get a government that, um, represents the working class, doing that peacefully without an economic collapse, without, rivers of blood. Yeah, no, I would be all for that as well. And I'm sure Dust agrees that ideally that would be how things go. But I don't, I don't fear a bloody revolution because I think, we're just way, 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 like, you can't compare us to Russia in 1917. It's just different. And we are not a revolutionary people, and we're not being pushed in revolutionary directions, at least violent revolutionary. What do you think, Dust? I mean, would you agree that you could probably agree with Ian that
I think,
you would prefer a
I,
peaceful transition?
yeah, I think the further down you go, the more revolutionary the people, because it's the class and that's the base of the class. But overall, I think all people who want revolution primarily want to improve conditions, and in a violent revolution, at least in the short term,
Yeah.
doesn't.
Yeah.
But I think only I think I have a recognition of the reality that everything is class struggle, and the only way to improve conditions is to build power for our class, which is the only class that can build socialism in a new society. When we make gains, if we organize and we make gains, they will violently repress us, and then we have to defend those gains. And the extent of the violence is chosen by the capitalists and the imperialists, not the working class simply trying to improve their conditions. We certainly aren't ultras and advocating people to take up guns and immediately have some display of energy and outlet that ultimately hurts the people we're trying to defend.
And I want to, I'm being contradicted by a commenter, and so let me just clarify. I like what she's saying. So she's Ms. Jonah of the Ark. So first, she asked me, when has this ever happened peacefully? And no, I agree. It's rare, but I mean, Venezuela, they took power there peacefully. Daniel Ortega in Nicaragua won an election, and he's in power there, and it's temporary because we're about to maybe bomb Venezuela because of the fact that 20 years ago, 25 years ago, the socialists came to power in an election. But and then I said the American people are not revolutionary, and she's like, that is not true. What about the yeah, of course. I'm speaking more to the the mindset of Americans today. Most Americans, I just today our mindset is a little bit different. Like people are just propagandized through generations and generations of anti-communist, anti-socialist propaganda, pro-capitalist, and they just don't have a class consciousness. So I'm just saying right now, and again, these conditions can change very quickly. As their living conditions change, their mental condition can change very quickly. And so I don't put it out. I'm simply saying, ideally, peaceful change of power would be great. It might not be possible. So, Ms. Joan of the Ark, you might be absolutely correct. The American people might get very revolutionary very quickly, and it might be violent. That's definitely a possible scenario, a possible future. So, I thank you for the opportunity to clarify what I was saying. And I'm going to read Christy Lynn here to finish off capitalism without having finished off social democracy in the working class movement. So it is impossible to finish off capitalism without having finished off social democracy in the working class movement. And I like that. Like social democracy is kind of the idea that reformism is possible. Incremental reformism. We're in the ballot box. And I think that's impossible because ultimately, at least in the imperial core where it really matters, maybe they'll let them do it in Venezuela or Nicaragua, but in the imperial core, they own the vote counting machines. And so they will never let anybody, win in an electoral process that is going to challenge their interests. And if they do, well, they can always just give that person lead poisoning, like they did with JFK. But all kinds of different perspectives and thoughts on this complicated reality that we are all experiencing. Dust, any last words? Last words.
I we're kind of going in circles with the ideological discussion. It's probably the news.
Can you repeat that?
You guys hear me?
You're cutting in and out a little bit. We can hear you now.
Yeah, I was saying ideological things going in circles. If I could briefly address social democracy and revolution, and that is, we're not going to win anybody by saying, hey, we need a revolution now. Even if we do need a violent revolution based on conditions, we're not going to win anybody. We're going to have to work with people and coalition and social democrats to get demands for the people. And then when the capitalist system is ultimately unable either to gain those demands or defend those demands, it's then when militant labor needs to physically defend those demands and pushes us towards revolution. But I think we should move on to the more news and current event aspects.
Are you referring to the shutdown or?
Yeah, the shutdown's a good one. I could do a brief unless you guys already have one prepared.
Oh no, I was trying to rush us off, but I don't need to rush us off. So no, if you have something to say on the shutdown, I would love to hear it. Ian was going in and out too. He looks like he's there now. But yeah, you wanna? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I could give a brief. So this Trump regime has unprecedented extremist austerity policies. And they're pushing them as hard as they can, and to the point where even the austerity light Democrats are like, no, we can't save face with our consistency and go along with this whatsoever. And what happened last night in the Senate or recently was essentially a Democrat capitulation to the austerity demands of the extremist Republican, and it's probably what was going to happen. But what they're doing with the shutdown is they're basically the austerity, the extremist austerity, mostly Republicans, are essentially saying we're going to gut everything, and if you don't gut it, we're not going to pass the bill. And the Democrats kind of put up a fight, but they're not really. And it looks like if this passes, at the very least, we're all going to lose. We're essentially is going to end the Affordable Care Act, which means hundreds of thousands of people are going to lose access to health care, and it's going to cause more poverty, more deaths, and we're going in that direction. And I think the correct thing is we need to work with anyone fighting against the extremists, while we're simultaneously building working class power that can and win better conditions for our class.
Oh, it's just, as far as the shutdown, I do agree with you. It was I actually told Billy Bob this before the show. It looked like a Democrat capitulate. I haven't looked too deep into it, but it looked like several Democrats breaking ranks and caving to the Trump faction, and they were just more willing to play hardball with the shutdown. Though at the same time, I don't understand how how Democrats decided this was a good battle to pick, because just optics wise, because I think the reasonable person on the street is like, okay, Obamacare is a good thing, okay, or the affordable health care is a good thing, but the extending it to people not in the country legally, that was one issue. I unfortunately don't remember the other big issue.
That's a false Republican talking point. They're not giving. Yeah, they're not giving. They're not. That is using of xenophobia and anti-immigrant bigotry to attack something that benefits everyone. Undocumented people don't have any access to health care other than they can't turn any away from the hospitals. Like that simply doesn't exist.
Okay, so it doesn't exist. So the contention, what is the point? Explain for it. So just for the purpose of the show, we have our me and Billy Bob and our 10 viewers. We have 10 viewers. It's a lot for us, by the way. What were the major points of contention that they were going back and forth on in regards to the Affordable Care Act?
They said that undocumented people. If you went on the Trump website itself, from the health department during the shutdown, it said we're unable to provide services now because because the Democrats are going to give health care to undocumented people and perform transgender operations. It said it on there. Now, is that actually a problem? First of all, are undocumented people getting health care? No, it's simply not happening. And is the U.S. is funding of transgender treatments a major issue? No, also false. It's entirely there to manipulate bigotry, to push people to support and justify the gutting of their public services. That's why it exists. That there is no basis in that distortion.
Yeah,
Okay,
and
so
I agree. Well, I agree that illegal immigrants aren't allowed to get healthcare other than emergency services, and they do go into the emergency rooms, when they have emergencies. But yeah, what percentage of the overall healthcare budget is that? It's probably not a lot, for sure. So go ahead, Ian.
So, what was the shutdown? So, Dust, in your own words, what was the shutdown about? What was meant?
The shutdown was extreme austerity policies being pushed, and then current services being threatened to be taken away if the whole of Congress doesn't cave into demands. That's essentially what happened. That's what happened, and it looks like we're losing. It looks like the austerity budget is going to pass. It looks like we lost, and it's because we don't have working class institutions. Our unions are weak. We have little to no say over our representatives. Like, it doesn't matter if we vote Democrats if we don't have working class institutions to push them to heal. And the population is bigoted and easily manipulated through issues like
ninnies? Are you suggesting they're ninnies?
yes, ninnies. Like anyone who doesn't support fully funding the Affordable Care Act at the minimum. And the reasons they give you is because undocumented immigrants and trans people, they are being manipulated by bigotry against their interests. Like, that's plain and simple.
No, I agree. I think that's true. I agree with the strategy. The strategy is to, under the guise of blaming, these people that are powerless, undocumented workers and things like that, blaming them and scapegoating them and saying they are the reason that we can't give you these services and we have to pass this budget where there's going to be even less services, and if you don't do it, there's going to be even less services from that. But yeah, I mean, I would just agree, and you're not. This isn't to disagree with you, Des, but I would just say that the Democrats are fully complicit in this. It's a spectacle. It's a theater. This has been scripted. It's playing out according to a script. And there's no opposition to it. It's one party, the oligarch party, that's marching this forward. And the way they're doing it is to, try and maintain this fiction that there's just two parties and the one party is just strong and the other party just has to capitulate or else. It's nonsense. That's the story that they're telling to justify the oligarchs, increasing their repression.
What else do we want to hit before we sign off? Or do we want to sign off now? Because I can go another 20 minutes or we can sign off now. It's kind of, I don't want to make anyone feel like they're being rushed, because I'm not rushed right now. I don't know.
Dust, you got more to say, or different topic or same topic, but more information for us?
So I want to see how everybody's feeling because I can argue about this topic or the next topic. I just want to make sure I'm not forcing anybody.
Is there any? Does anybody else have a news item prepared for any recent events?
Well, we could have talked about. I guess there's a blackout now for the first time in Ukraine. Pokrovsk seems like it's going to be under Russian control very soon. That's another current event that we were talking about.
I wouldn't have much input, but I'd be interested in listening to either you and Ian on that subject.
Ian, since you're geographically closer, you probably are the expert. Can Ian hear us? It strikes me that he's not hearing what we're saying. Ian, thumbs up if you can hear us. Okay, I don't know what's going on with Ian. So some technical difficulties at the moment. But yeah, we definitely. I don't mind, sharing my perspective of what's been happening in Ukraine over the last week or two, which I can do. So yeah, we've been talking about Pokrovsk for weeks, and it seems like there's a battle over the reality of it. There's Ukraine-friendly media telling one story, Russian-friendly media telling another, and somebody's got to be lying. And it just seems more and more like it's Ukraine that's lying, given the evidence that we have. And so it's an important victory for Russia to be able to take that city, and it's just demonstrates how Russia's only going to get stronger, and it's just going to improve their position, and things are going to start to snowball. Really, it's the snowball effect, and so that's kind of what Pokrovsk represents. And then the other thing with the blackouts, I think it's an unprecedented missile and drone attack by Russia against energy infrastructure in Ukraine. And heretofore, they have avoided going after these targets. And the fact that they're going after these targets now is just indicative of the fact that they've had a willingness, a new willingness to escalate in an unprecedented way. And so what that means, I think we're going to find out. But it definitely means that the poor people in Ukraine are going to be struggling this winter, and there's going to be a lot of pressure on Zelensky, and how he responds to that is gonna determine how things go. But Ian, can you hear me at all? Because I don't know if anybody can hear me.
I can hear you, and I cut out for a minute there. I apologize. About a minute ago, I cut out. I've been cutting out sometimes, but I think that's a good summary when it comes to the USA and the rules-based order, as they like to call themselves. I think Ukraine's a very important battlefront. And I think it really calls into question people's understanding of power dynamics and also scale, because previously we've only had just the American perspective on small isolated countries. So they did so like, for example, 2003, they invaded Iraq. There's shock and awe. They attacked power plants. They attacked what they called strategic sites, dual purpose sites, and basically they took the whole country in a few months. And so the narrative was that the USA is the world's last that's the world's last superpower. They can do that to any country, and it's just that's the power dynamic. But now we're seeing in Ukraine. Okay, what does it look like when you have Russia fighting this Ukraine, which is a lot smaller than Russia and has a much smaller population than Russia, but they're backed by 50 other countries, giving them an infant. So you have Ukraine, which has probably 3 or 4 million military-age males who can fight, and you have Europe and the USA giving them as many weapons as they need, and giving them as much capital as they need, giving them as much materials as they need. A Ukrainian power station is destroyed by Russian missiles. What happens? They send in the parts from from the Czechs, from Poland, from whoever to repair that power station. And what happens when a Ukrainian factory is destroyed? They send in more parts from Europe or the USA. They send in U.S. Patriot missiles. They send in tanks. They send in whatever they need. And we kind of have this World War I situation where there's not dramatic changes in territory, right? Like in World War II and like in wars before World War I. Right? It's very interesting that we have this. And a lot of people say it's a stalemate, but I don't think that's actually true. What's happening is it's actually a very dynamic war. You have very, very significant things happening, but when you look at a map, when you look on the internet, it doesn't look significant, but it's actually very significant. And I think I think Ukraine will be a very for the new world order, for what the world looks like and the power dynamic between different countries looks like, will be determined by what happens in Ukraine. So I don't know if anyone here disagrees with that, or if I'm preaching to the choir. Am I preaching to the choir a little bit here? Maybe I am.
Yeah. Dust, any thoughts?
No, Dust, are you with us? Are you still with us? You're muted.
He might have muted himself. But he might be, he might not have any thoughts. No, I agree with that. No, it's huge. Ukraine is a very big deal. I mean, it would be a catastrophic defeat for NATO. And that's the problem. They just don't know how to deal with this. They had big aspirations. They had big ideas about getting this huge victory. And it's just not turning out how they had wanted. And so now they have to deal with a catastrophic defeat and how they're going to manage that defeat. And that's what we see playing out. And I agree, it's huge. It is a huge event. It's a huge, significant thing. Thing isn't a good word, but you know what I'm saying. So we're gonna find out, if they can figure out how to accept defeat and take an L and try and minimize the fallout from that, or if they're just going to double down and continue for the next 10 years, trying to once Ukraine's all used up, then they'll go to Poland and Romania and use somebody else up. We will see. I see Dust in the studio. I would hate to end the program without hearing if he has anything to say.
Yeah, I was trying to respond. I think someone's calling me my headset. You hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you. It's a little in and out. Yes.
Okay, yeah. What I was saying, I wanted to paraphrase a Russian official. And what they said was the amount that the U.S. and in the West, the imperialist bloc collectively, are spending to give weapons to Ukraine could have built a free, prosperous, democratic Ukraine 100 times over. Could have easily invested and built. But the thing is, a free, prosperous, democratic Ukraine would naturally be an ally of Russia. Their people would decide to be an ally of Russia because it's in their best interest. So they just want to use them to attack and destroy Russia. So ultimately, I don't think it's even Russia's resources or it's Russia's geopolitical position being able to be an ally of oppressed nations and nations that could be competitors to their energy dominance. So a direct result of Russia being engulfed in the war in Ukraine is the destruction of Syria, is less exports of wheat. And that is what they're doing. And it really makes me mad that people say I support Ukraine when they support Ukraine's destruction, when people who are pro peace, pro prosperity, pro working with Russia are actually supporting the people of Ukraine and their sovereignty.
Yeah. No, I make that point. Anybody that legitimately supports Ukraine would support a government that wants good relationships with Russia to stop the war, and never begin the war. And of course, Zelensky campaigned on doing just that, but he was a total puppet of Western imperialism, and we always knew we were going to use Ukraine, and we don't care about Ukrainians. We don't care. We're using them for our own purposes against their own interests, and that's the problem. And yet these people with their yellow and blue flags thinking that they support Ukraine when they're supporting Ukraine's destruction. It's mind-boggling. But I wouldn't mind ending on that topic. And there's been some nice commentary about us, and so that's always nice to go out on a note of positivity.
Yes, it's always good to end on a positive note, for sure.
Any follow-up commentary, Duff, before I dismiss us? We've had some technical issues. We have navigated some serious technical issues this program.
If I need to pee, I'm sorry. So
okay, yeah, Dust, poor Dust got in the he's driving his truck, and I'm sure he went through an area with no signal. So yeah, we try and do episodes every Tuesday and Friday. Often we will just do one or the other, but ideally we'll be back this coming Friday. I think I did have a guest who agreed that he could join us on Friday, so we'll probably stream live on Friday. But appreciate everyone watching. And Ian, thank you very much for joining me. And we'll see you guys on Friday. Thank you very much. I think